Good morning and a very warm welcome to the Connecting Nature Innovation Summit. We're absolutely delighted that you can join us virtually here in Glasgow on this spring morning. I'm Julie Proctor, Chief Executive of Green Space Scotland, and we're delighted to be a partner in the Connecting Nature programme and to be co-hosting this summit along with colleagues at Glasgow City Council, one of the front-runner cities of the Connecting Nature programme. Whilst we are sad that we aren't all gathering here today in person, delivering this Innovation Summit digitally has had some real benefits, not least that so many more of you have been able to join us. Over the next 3 days, we'll be welcoming over 1,000 delegates from over 50 countries. So this truly is a global gathering and a real feeling that Glasgow is welcoming the world as it will again later this year with COP26. This has been an unprecedented year. And as we start now to look forward with hope for a brighter future, over the next 3 days, we will showcase, discuss and explore innovations in nature-based solutions. We'll look at how they can, how they should, indeed how they absolutely must be part of the green recovery. Today marks a year since those of us in the UK went into our first lockdown. It is a time for remembrance and for reflection, and we will be marking the 1 minute silence for reflection at 12 noon today. Over the year, we've all had to adapt, to learn to do things differently, and to do that at a speed and a pace that has been absolutely unprecedented. So as we look forward to the future with hope, we want to apply that same speed, that same urgency to the realisation and embedding of nature-based solutions. And I'm sure you're going to be inspired by the discussions and presentations over the next 3 days. We normally do the thanks at the end of an event, but I just wanted to bring them up front this time and to acknowledge the incredible work of the Summit team in creating and curating this first Connecting Nature Innovation Summit. And I'd particularly like to give thanks to my colleague Emma Halliday at Green Space Scotland, to Sean Kelly and Laura Mowat at Glasgow City Council, and not forgetting Gillian Dick, who leads the Council's work on the Connecting Nature programme. Many thanks also to all of the speakers, the session chairs, the other contributors and Connecting Nature partners. And a huge thank you to all of you for joining us at the Summit. It is going to be an interesting and inspiring 3 days. We've got a really varied and exciting programme, an absolute smorgasbord of delights and innovations. We're looking forward to presentations, to panel discussions, to virtual site visits and innovation cafes. So please do engage and enjoy. Listen, learn and share. And please do check out the expo area to find out more about Summit partners and speakers and to connect and network with colleagues. So let's get the summit underway. I'd now like to invite Councillor Susan Aitken, Leader of Glasgow City Council, to say a few words of welcome. Over to you, Susan.
Good morning and thank you very much, Julie, and all colleagues at Green Space Scotland and everyone in the Innovation Summit team. I'm delighted that the selection of Glasgow as one of the 3 front-runner cities in the Connecting Nature programme has allowed us a further opportunity to collaborate with our international peers in seeking a more sustainable and fairer future for our planet. Glasgow's status as host for COP26 has even thus far been an incredible opportunity for the city to plug into truly global conversations on the challenges and the responses to the climate emergency. Within the city, local government and subnational networks that Glasgow is engaged with, that willingness to share knowledge, skills and experience to achieve our net zero targets is really evident. And the Connecting Nature programme and the Innovation Summit have that same collaborative approach at their core. And I'm proud that the strides that we're taking as a city are being recognised. In so many ways, Glasgow is a template for cities on a similar historic path, that of industrial decline, the physical and social challenges that are the legacy of our pasts, but also the ability to re-emerge into a low carbon and sustainable present and future. And over the next few days, you'll hear about some of the work that's being done here in Glasgow, in Scotland, and indeed across Europe on strategies, approaches and partnerships to deliver a wide and diverse range of nature-based interventions. And Julie's already mentioned them, but I'd particularly like to thank my colleague Gillian Dick and her team for the work that they lead in Glasgow on nature-based solutions, their input into the Connecting Nature project and the work of the Glasgow Connecting Nature team in helping to deliver this very important summit. I want to make a couple of points. Central to the global conversations that Glasgow and our peer cities are engaged in is that critical importance of cities to the sustainability agenda. Cities are where most of the world's citizens live, work and travel. We are literally the heat maps, but cities like Glasgow, Genk and Poznan are where both the greatest challenges, but also the greatest gains for carbon neutrality lie. So much about the climate emergency is an urban agenda, and it's cities that are best placed to deliver. And nature-based solutions are absolutely critical to that, to create healthier, more livable places. The bang for the carbon zero buck that investment in cities delivers is equally applicable to nature-based solutions. In terms of the ecological, environmental and social gains and to the well-being of our citizens, natural interventions are inextricably bound up with our transition to net zero. To give just one example, Glasgow's Avenues programme is a long-term project to redesign and reprioritise our key city centre streets to reduce the dominance of the car and create cleaner, healthier spaces. Within that programme, the planting of street trees is of central importance, transforming streets into spaces for people, for recreation, for active travel, and delivering a host of other social, environmental and economic benefits. I also believe it's vital that the net zero agenda is delivered and communicated in a way that resonates with ordinary citizens and is relevant to their everyday lives and challenges. So when I talk about the inseparability of climate and social justice, our citizens have to know that this is also about warmer homes, a positive impact on their cost of living, or delivering the skills and job opportunities necessary for the new green economy. And when I talk about nature-based solutions, I want our citizens to know that this is about making Glasgow a healthier, more attractive and generally better place for them to live in. Again, another example, far too many, particularly of our most socially challenged communities, have been blighted for generations now by swathes of vacant and derelict land, a legacy of our post-industrial past. And there's an urgency now about repurposing these as spaces for recreation, for growing, for carbon sequestration, rain and flood capture, and for health and community engagement opportunities. And the reminder that within this agenda, we must give equal weighting to the grey and blue zones as well as the green is particularly pertinent in Glasgow. Our river, the Clyde, was the catalyst for and location of much of our industrialisation. But save for some regeneration in the past couple of decades, our riverside, just yards from which lie some of Scotland's most deprived communities, has too often festered and been abandoned. As communities were redeveloped, we literally turned their backs to the river. But the interventions necessary to mitigate the threats of global warming have the capacity to release land and transform our riverside. Glasgow's blue zone is the biggest open space in our city with enormous potential, and not solely for economic purposes, for leisure, recreation, restoring and nurturing habitat. This is a nature-based intervention to deliver what our citizens have long asked of us, the return of the River Clyde as the centrepiece of our city life. So thanks very much for coming to Glasgow, for asking me to welcome you here this morning. I hope that in the months ahead we can work together to move from the global pandemic towards COP26 and a global agreement to work for a safer, healthier, more equitable, zero carbon future for planet and for people. I hope that you enjoy the next few days. I'm sure that there will be a lot of great learning and experiences to share. So thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you to Glasgow for hosting the summit and providing a lead on nature-based solutions. We're now going to move from Scotland's largest city to a Scotland-wide perspective with an opening address now from Aileen Campbell, MSP and Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government. Aileen, over to you.
I'm pleased to have the chance to speak to you today and give thanks to Green Space Scotland and Glasgow City Council for bringing us together, all kindly supported by partners in the European Union. And while we can only be together virtually, having Glasgow, which of course means Dear Green Place in Gaelic, is a suitably named backdrop for today's discussions. This virtual gathering is a reminder, as if one were needed, of just how challenging life still remains as we continue to respond to the global pandemic. It's now a year since those of us here in Scotland went into lockdown. A year since the world changed forever and our lives became heavily restricted. A milestone like this gives us a chance to reflect on that and, importantly, a chance to consider how we choose to move forward. And this is important because while the impact of COVID has been and continues to be harsh and traumatic, we have also seen some actions and activities that we don't want to lose. We saw partnership and collaboration happen at a pace and scale that many of us across public life have been trying to coax and encourage for some time. We saw a flourishing of activity in our communities. We saw a drop in commuting levels, and we saw a reconnection with nature as people got out and explored the green space around them. We all had to rapidly change how we did things, and even though the unfortunate prompt was a nasty virus and a global pandemic, that shift in policy and behaviours, that trust that we place in our communities, and that decoupling from the shackles of red tape are actually not things that we want to lose. So this experience and the opportunity that we have to disrupt what we might describe as an I-beam culture is too precious to miss. Because if we grab it and harness it, the outcomes and the outlook for our people, our communities and country start to look more positive. It's never been enough to simply recover from this pandemic, but to instead reform what we do and reimagine what we want to become. Because while there has been a flourishing of activity and good practice and community endeavour, and while everyone has been impacted by COVID, we all of us know that it has been those with least that have been impacted the most. COVID brought into sharp relief the persistent inequalities that exist in Scotland and across the UK. Everyone was urged to stay at home, with a safe and secure home suddenly becoming a public health tool. It was a whole lot easier if you had a home, and if that home was safe, warm and secure, was connected to the internet, if you had a secure job, or if you had a garden or green space in which you could get out in, enjoy, and importantly, feel safe in. So recovery from this pandemic won't ever be enough if all that ends up happening is reverting back to normal, when that normality has failed too many for too long, and where there seems to have been a tacit acceptance that inequality is somehow inevitable. There is a chance now to start to do things differently, to embrace the positive change that we've seen and to build forward with activity to rebalance our economy and refocus on what matters with people and good quality green places at its heart. We should seek to ensure our recovery is green. Focus has rightly been placed on the impact of COVID, but the climate emergency has never left us. Therefore, we should use this moment to build from the much more heightened awareness and appreciation of the environment around us and the well-being that green space and nature brings. And as we move to recovery, the restorative power of nature should not be ignored as part of the healing that we all need to do. That is why, through our programme for government, we've committed to supporting 20-minute neighbourhoods, where people can meet their needs within a 20-minute walk from home, including access to green space, enabling people to live better, healthier lives and supporting our net zero ambitions. And in Housing to 2040, our 20-year housing strategy, we have a focus on the delivery of new affordable homes. But we also recognise the need to also create great places and spaces for people to live, grow and play in. The last year's experience has taught us just how important and crucial it is to get that right. Scottish Government respects the role of nature-based solutions and the multifunctional benefits they can offer. National infrastructure is already integrated in many of our infrastructure programmes such as housing and regeneration, flood, water and drainage management and active travel. We've made some significant injections of funding to support it. Our infrastructure investment plan sets out a long-term vision of infrastructure in Scotland which supports an inclusive net zero carbon economy and includes details on over £26 billion of major projects and large programmes. With overwhelming support through our earlier consultation, we now have the widest definition of infrastructure in the UK and many parts of the world that includes natural infrastructure. This means we can take a more holistic view of our infrastructure assets and recognise the wider contribution that nature can have in creating sustainable places, reducing emissions and improving well-being. These complement our investments of almost £9 billion for environmental sustainability and the transition to net zero emissions. This includes £2 billion dedicated to tackling climate change through our low carbon fund, which provides support for woodland creation, peatland restoration and the reuse of vacant and derelict land. All of these are critical to delivering the infrastructure needed for our transition to net zero by 2045. Our statement of intent for biodiversity sets the direction for a new biodiversity strategy which will respond to the increasing urgency for action to tackle the twin challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. It highlights the benefit of nature-based solutions such as woodland restoration and creation, peatland restoration and urban green infrastructure for people and nature. And that's why we've committed £250 million over 10 years on peatland restoration and an additional £150 million over the next 5 years in forestry. We're also committed to realising the potential of tiny forests in Scotland, which can support biodiversity and improve urban green space for local communities. We've also welcomed the Vacant and Derelict Lands Task Force recommendations and will work with the Scottish Land Commission and other stakeholders to develop proposals to help deliver a culture change in Scotland's approach to vacant and derelict land. As part of that, I am pleased to announce from this week our new £50 million low carbon vacant and derelict land investment programme is open to applications for funding. This programme will help with tackling persistent vacant and derelict land, delivering regeneration and supporting a green recovery, in turn promoting social justice and well-being across Scotland, especially in more disadvantaged areas. And given the flourishing of our communities as they rolled up their sleeves during the last year to look after each other, it's right that we continue to empower them to support their efforts to tackle climate change. That's why we've committed to developing a network of climate action towns that will exploit the co-benefits of climate action, empowering communities to develop greener, healthier, more livable places, whilst contributing to Scotland's response to the global climate and ecological emergencies. We're also working on the next National Planning Framework, NPF4. It's Scotland's spatial plan and will include a review of our planning policy. And some of the most significant policy changes we expect to explore in developing NPF4 will be expanding green infrastructure and natural places, new policies to promote an infrastructure first approach, including green and blue infrastructure, and support for 20-minute neighbourhoods. The pandemic and the desire for a green recovery has prompted us to rethink our neighbourhoods, our towns, our cities and rural communities, to rethink how we live and to reassess what is important to us. And it's clear that nature-based solutions can offer us a different way of doing things that are sustainable and good for the soul and good for our well-being. To deliver this green, fair and human rights-based recovery, government cannot do it on our own, and that's why it is essential that we work in partnership with empowered communities in order that local approaches and contexts are reflected, and because, quite simply, our communities are the experts in what their needs and their aspirations are. Aristotle said, "In all things of nature there is something of the marvellous," and he's right. We have a chance to rebuild a marvellous future, and empowered communities and nature need to be at its heart. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Aileen, for those inspiring words and for sharing with us some of Scottish Government's ambitions and actions for the future around nature-based solutions. We'll certainly carry forward those words of positive change and greener recovery over the next 3 days. And the last speaker now in this opening session, providing a European context to the summit, is Kieran Cuffe, MEP. Kieran, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning to you from Brussels, from the European Quarter in Brussels. And thank you to Connecting Nature, the Connecting Nature Project, Green, and Glasgow City Council for inviting me to speak at this opening event for the Innovation Summit. And thanks to Emma for organising, Sean for moderating, and it is really good to join Julie, Susan and Aileen in opening the conference. You know, the last time I was in Glasgow, it must have been about 25 years ago, and I was in Fergusley Park out in Paisley because of a European project that was linking in areas of deprivation in different cities, and it linked in a place called the Liberties in Dublin, where I was then a city councillor, and the community in Fergusley Park, and I met some fantastic people in the few days I spent in Glasgow. And I just had a quick look there, and I was really pleased to see that there was developments in Glencoats Park in Fergusley Park, because green space and the availability of nature is so important back in the Liberties in Dublin, but also particularly in areas of disadvantage in Glasgow and elsewhere. So nice to make that connection. You know, the geographer David Harvey said there's nothing unnatural about New York City. And I think the same can be said about Brussels or Dublin or Glasgow. And we need to understand that there is nothing unnatural about our cities. They are made from and fundamentally based in nature. And humanity's relationship to nature needs to understand this. Because our anthropogenic perspective is causing irreversible damage. And to have a sustainable future, we need to find nature-based solutions to our societal challenges. And these solutions, they hold the potential to provide sustainable benefits for not only nature, but also for people. And from a European perspective, I'm gradually seeing an improved understanding of this within the institutions that I interact with here in Brussels. And I know that more than €200 million has been invested in nature-based solutions research and projects just over the last 4 years. And to give you a few examples from around Europe, I mean, apart from your own Connecting Nature project, there's the Grow Green project, which has led to discernible results in assisting with wastewater runoff in Manchester and temperature regulation in Valencia in Spain. And Urban Green Up has developed a digital tool to fit cities' needs. And then there's the Naturevation project, which scales this up, creating a multi-criteria evaluation framework. And in addition, the Nature for Cities and the Think Nature projects have created platforms to promote nature-based solution methods and dialogue. And looking to the future, we hear a lot of talk about the European Green Deal, but this does provide an opportune framework to fast-track nature-based solutions through strategies such as Farm to Fork and biodiversity, and pledges such as the Bonn Challenge, which sets 2030 targets for forest protection and restoration. Just within the last few weeks, I've been a part of a negotiating team on the Connecting Europe facility, 32 billion, a lot of money going into new infrastructure. And we've worked hard to ensure that 10% goes into biodiversity and 60% into climate funding. And nature is at the heart of the inspiration for these decisions. So while the EU must stop deforestation within its borders and ban products linked to the destruction of forests and ecosystems, this must not offset climate inaction in other sectors and in cities especially. And I think climate action has been delayed for decades. You know, the business as usual scenario, which is very hard to shift, but it leaves no time for delaying cuts in emissions. It really doesn't as we run down the clock to the COP26 summit. We do know that 80% of European cities will live in cities in the year 2050. That'll be a big increase, maybe 36 million or 10% more than today's numbers. And nature has to be at the heart of solutions in our towns and cities, in agriculture, in transport, industry, housing, and energy. And research is essential to future nature-based solutions, but we also need to facilitate wider implementation and collaboration to give local authorities the best tools and knowledge. And because it's at this scale, the local, that true, appropriate and lasting changes can occur, and where consistent policies can be constructed. We also need to move out of the silos. I know from having been involved in local government for 30 years that often different groups within local authorities don't speak the same language and often communicate by semaphore at a distance. And far too often, regardless of what the question is, concrete is the answer. And we need to move beyond that. And that requires a transdisciplinary and a citizen-centered approach to increase the relevance of nature-based solutions and to ensure fairness, acceptance, and ultimately sustainability. So this needs organisation flexibility and support at all levels and facilitating citizen involvement that goes beyond the standard stakeholder interactions at a technocratic compromise level. I'm tempted to quote Sherry Arnstein, her ladder of citizen participation, but we don't have time to go into that. But we do need to engage in the personal sphere of the citizen to ensure buy-in and limit pushback. And we need to listen and to learn as well as teach. And as decision makers, we must take care not to marginalize, especially the most vulnerable in our societies. Through something as simple as creating meeting places to discuss community needs, or engaging with children and young people in the planning and construction of nature-based solutions, we can achieve much better. And overall, we need to not only innovate with the technical aspects of nature-based solutions, but push for more wide-reaching and innovative ways to collaborate and develop inclusive climate adaptation and governance. So with those few words, I hope they are of some relevance to the discussions that you're having today. I'm looking forward to the interactions and the discussion that will now take place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kieran, for those wise words and the European perspective and overview. And we're looking forward to welcoming you back to Glasgow sometime, hopefully very soon. So with that, that concludes the opening session. My task now is to hand over to the next session, which will be chaired by Marcus Collier and hosted by Sean Kelly. So please do enjoy the rest of the summit, and I look forward to meeting you in other sessions. Sean, handing the baton on to you. Thank you.